Hello, everyone, and welcome to the update on customs classification and tariffs. So, I'm excited to talk about tariff classification, and you know why this is important. Tariff classification matters so much because this is a fundamental part that you need to know as a trade compliance specialist, as a customs manager with 1 year experience or 20 years of experience, because the commodity code, the HS code, the HTS code, whatever you call it, starts it all off. With the right 6, 8, 10, 14, 12 digit, how many numbers you have combination, you can identify the product as detailed as the customs authorities would like it to be. With the correct code comes a lot of information, such as what is the duty rate for importation, but also what licenses do I require? Are there any special particularities I need to know? For example, might there be a supplementary unit I need to put into the customs declaration? Or are there any specific requirements, codes that I need to code before I can import? Also, the commodity codes code has impact on other areas, such as, for example, FTAs, right? Free trade agreements. They're all based on commodity codes. Also, recent regulations in the EU are leveraging commodity codes, such as EUDR or CBAM. So these are very separate topics, but unless you have a good grasp on customs classification, the concepts and how it works, we're not going to get anywhere with customs classification. So put it on your bucket list if you haven't. I need to be good at customs classification and understanding what a tariff is. I'm not going to go into how it all works. There's training for that. What I'm going to go into is the update on classification. So now I need to assume that you know what customs classification is in tariff. So if you haven't, then please stop and learn that first. Now, this is an update for the EU and the UK. If you're in the US or you're anywhere else, then this is not for you, okay? We are also talking about 2025. So if you're watching this at some other time, then this might not be up to date, but the principles are all the same. So assuming you know what tariff classification is and why it is so important, and why it is important to be constantly up to date with tariffs, it's because they change all the time. That means what is a code today might not be an legible code tomorrow. How often does it change? It can be all the time. It will depend on your system. Codes in the EU are updated daily. Almost daily there is a change. Now, they are very minor and sometimes not even noticeable. Sometimes they can change significantly. Now, there is a big bang change, which always happens at the beginning of the year. And this is where the small bits become bigger. Not as big as they can be, but the changes become bigger. And in 2025, we have a medium size update. So the small one is the daily changes that need to be made behind the scenes that you will never know of. Not much. If you're a software provider, then you will know about those because you need to update the tariff every day. And I've been with trade compliance companies and software houses for half a decade, so I know how hard my team worked to keep the tariffs up to date. Every other day there was a new change. But the one we are talking about, I would call the medium change, the end of the year change. There is also a bigger change. Let me just cover that biggest change quickly. Every 5 years, we're going to go all out, okay? Every 5 years is a big update from the WCO, the World Customs Organization. They are the only ones that have the right to mess with the first 6 digits. In the EU or the UK, the medium update, we only can mess with everything beyond the first 6 digits. So that means in the 2025 update, we're going to look at everything be after 6, so 7, 8, and possibly a little bit more onwards. Knowing that the tariff itself, a customs tariff, only ever describes 8 digits. So there is an EU combined nomenclature, which in fact is an annex of a regulation, and that only talks about ever 8 digits. So the only thing we really talk about is changes to the 7th and the 8th digits rather than anything else, because the first 6 digits, the structure is fixed by the WCO and can't change. So that means you will not see fundamentally new products arising, but just a further categorization of products within their grouping already. Okay, so you'll see that in a moment. Now, covering EU and UK, we need to talk about the UK separately because the UK is not part of the European Union. So that means what? It means we have two tariffs, at least two, we actually have three. So we have the EU tariff, which is important for companies importing into the EU territory and exporting out of the EU territory. And then we have the UK tariff. We are talking about the UK tariff for Great Britain, which is Wales, England, and Scotland. And then we have Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland, due to the arrangements between the EU and the UK, has a special status and benefits from its own tariff. It's a very small territory, but very crucial territory. And due to the connection with the Republic of Ireland and the likes of it, we have a special deal. Okay, so we have two tariffs. Now, the difference between the UK tariff for Great Britain and the UK tariff for Northern Ireland is that the UK tariff for Northern Ireland is secretly the EU tariff for political reasons and for lots of other logistical reasons. So when you see UK trade tariff, and that's not a real statement, it's not a completely accurate statement, but let's simplify it. The UK trade tariff for Northern Ireland is de facto the EU tariff with some UK additions, let's put it that way. But from a classification point of view, any change that the EU makes need to be carried forward by the UK Northern Ireland tariff. The Great Britain tariff, if it chooses to align itself to the EU, well, that's its prerogative. The point is, what the UK wants to do in Great Britain, the UK can do in Great Britain and doesn't need to ask or consult anybody else. For strategic reasons, the UK may wish to be aligned to the EU combined nomenclature to keep it easy and simple, but that must not be the case. Okay, so just be mindful if you are trading between the EU and the UK that just because you have an EU export code of 8 digits, it doesn't automatically mean, in most cases it will, but it doesn't have to automatically mean that the UK trade tariff for Great Britain will have the same 8 digits. It does right now, but in the future it doesn't have to be. What's even more important to remember is when you're importing into Great Britain, it's not enough to have 8 digits. You need the 10 digits. Okay, this is your import code. So for an EU company to give me as a customs clearance agent an 8-digit EU code is nice to have, but I still need 2 digits at the very least. So where am I going to get that from? If I am your customs agent, I shouldn't be making this up. You should be telling me. So put yourself in this situation. The tariff changes at the end of the year. The announcement of when the tariff changes, the medium tariff changes occur, happen on the 31st of October in the EU. Because the UK is what it is, they do not need to conform to the 31st of October for the 7 and 8 digits changes. And they don't. They have their own system, which makes it a bit more difficult to ensure that you have updated your tariff correctly. And there's a little bit of panic with my clients, anyway, my customers, on when and how to change. Because tariffs are usually maintained in an ERP system, maybe at global headquarters, rather than within individual sites or compliance areas, and therefore have their own internal procedures. So to follow all of this, to do all of this, you need to be quite smart and understand what the changes are, and then take the month of November and December to actually update the ERP system and make sure everything's smooth. So once the ERP system's up to date, you also need to communicate with the brokers, the ones that are fighting for you, and make sure that they know if there are changes that affect your business. So you see there's a bit of homework clearing up to do through November and December, and that is an exercise that repeats every year. Okay, so this is why we're having this update, so that you know what changed. And you know that there's a difference between an EU tariff and the UK tariff. Okay, so I've already explained why this matters. Accurate classification is a fundamental aspect of international trade. I've said that it ensures the regulatory requirements are met, the correct application of duties and taxes, and of course the smooth clearance through customs. These are the reasons why you need to invest time in making sure you understand what your HS code is. There's a lot of questions about how do you do that, and not everything is so easy. But You need to be certain that the commodity code is correct and defendable, and you know why you've given it this commodity code. Because if you don't, if you get doubt into the system, and worse, if you get doubt by the customs authorities into your ability to classify the products correctly, then this can lead very quickly to costly penalties, delays, and reputational risks. And that means there is no higher importance, regrettably, than to prioritize proper classification practices. And therefore, you should salute all of yourselves if you are a customs classification person or you're dealing with customs classification, that you insist again and again and again, no, I will not take shortcuts. We will classify this the right way, whatever it takes. Now, what we've done is we are helping our customers and clients with classification. This is not a sales pitch at all. I'm just saying the EU is publishing decisions on complicated matters, not easy matters, but often, where a product could be this or it could be that, and we need an official decision. I'll give you some examples later on. And we just record that in a decision library. And so we have it very easy. It's a blog entry that says, okay, sections 15 or HS 1501, the EU classified something, and you might want to look at that. So this is something you can easily do yourself. You just keep a record of everything that was published, and you create a training tool that allows your clients your collaborators, that's the word, collaborators to constantly keep up to date with what the EU has been doing. So we collect that and we put that onto our blogs so that you can we even put it into a quiz. So we say, okay, that's the product. What do you think is the classification? And then we guide you through an exercise that says, okay, these are the characteristics. Now you go. And then we'll give you the solution. So it's a bit of a fun game in order to classify. So we have this decision library, and I encourage everybody to keep a track record of the decisions that are made. I'm not talking about a BTO. I'm talking about the OJ published classification decisions in the official journal of the EU. And also I should mention the UK has the same. They will publish tariff stops, and that means they have then tell you this is the product and this is how we classified it. Actually, they just copy it from the EU, but they don't tell you. All right, so you want to make sure you support the team as much as possible on classification, and if you have a doubt, you should talk about it. So, how does it work for the EU CN 2025 then? Well, at the end of October, so always a Halloween surprise, or not, we're going to get a new version of the combined nomenclature. So in the EU, we call it a CN code, combined nomenclature code, and the traditional word is HS code, a harmonized system code. And then in the US, we call it HTS codes. And I only mention that because we have so much confusion with the names. So somebody calls it this, the other one calls it this, and so on. So legal text was published. You need to look out for this, as you can see here. And then there's a press release, and that press release tells you that it was published. So there you go. Let me tell you a little bit at high level what the changes are. And you can see already now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 that I've given you. Okay, that doesn't mean this is the complete list. It just means this is what happened. So shark and shark fins, that has a sustainability, environmental protection, animal protection kind of ring to it. And you can also see that we're not talking about the first 6 digits ever here. You can see them all listed in at least 8 digits. Yeah. If you're not into shark and shark fins, there's nothing for you to change. So the likelihood of you having to change anything might actually be very, very small. But what if you miss something? So you should know what's changing. So shark and shark fins, tomatoes, biofuels, liquid urea, okay, wood waste and laminate floor covering, steel laminations and stator and rotor cores. So, or just by looking at that, you might say, actually, nothing for me to change. Nothing for me to change. Good news, you are done. But imagine next year, and imagine the year after. What if? You need to keep this in mind. I always do it like this. I look at the EU first, because the UK is a little messy. I'm sorry. They update every day. They do tariff stops. I never know where I am with this. With the EU, you are clear. It's very clear what will change. They also offer Excel sheets, correlation tables. What is added, what is removed. What is moved, not removed, but moved within the system. If you understand the EU logic, you can understand the UK logic, providing that there's alignment, strategic alignment between the two. Good. So talk to you about the correlation tables. We can maybe even have a look. So let me see if this works. I can open this. Yeah, just let me do this. When we do this, and I'll move myself down here. When we do this live link, we can see how this actually looks. So I prefer to do something in a live version, live demo like this, because it will just give you more information on it. So let's accept these cookies. And then let us download this just to show you. See if we get anywhere with this. Yeah. And then we open it here. See if that works. And maybe, yeah, there you can see it. So hopefully this can be seen. And you can now see, hopefully this is very clear. With this, your ERP system can work very well, but also all the different operators can work. You can work and you can get your team to work. So you can see absorbed codes, you can see new codes, and and you can see when this is applicable. Okay, so there's even the start dates was already earlier. It might have just been updated. So you can read here the explanation. You can understand how this all works. So we don't have time to look at this right now, but you can see here's the third version of the annual correlation table, which includes the end of year's update. So that's good to know. You see that the extraction was actually done on the 7th of January. So even post the 31st, there might be some changes. So these correlation tables, you need to really have them ready. You can see here the new codes, the start dates, the derived from where it comes from. So you know what new codes is there and which codes got absorbed and so on. And then you have the new codes here. I've already mentioned. So these are the new codes and this is where they come from. So this is old. And if that's what you have, then this is no longer available. This is new. So there might be a little change here, but that's all. Then the old codes. Actually, I looked at, this is what I started with, the old code, new codes, absorb codes. So it's the other way around. Bad code, good code. And then you can also see, for example, if you are, for example, say you are in, let's just take 30. Let's just take chapter or HS code. So 29, lots of changes in 29. Or at least to look at old codes. And then if we go to 30, so this is a lot because there are many codes. And you see how they all change and how they're all absorbed. So in 29, we have a lot, 29, 30. All of this is 29, 31, 32, 33. So you see, it keeps going. And there's a very little on 30. Okay, so if you're in 30, for example, in chapter 30, if you're in heading, and then it's only heading 3002, and if you're not in those, well, there's nothing for you to change, for example. Okay, so this just to quickly show you how this can work in practice. So let's go back here. Good. And this is what happens when you click on the correlation table. You can actually just, when you get this slide deck, just click on it and you know you're in a good spot. Okay, so all these hyperlinks that we've put here are for you to use. Great. So this was until the 31st of December. It was published on the 7th, so there might be updates now. So this is how you go about it. You look for the correlation table. You also, one step back, you could do this. You could open this. And then when you open it, you will see the law like this. Okay, this is a little much. I understand that. But if you clicked here, for example, or on the PDF, let's just go with the PDF, it's quite big, then you will have the official document. And I know it's not easy and not a lot of people look at the document like this, but I am also quite enthusiastic about law. So I'm actually interested in this. And just to understand how it works, I would spend a bit of time looking at the annex. Here you can see how it's all structured, so I won't go into all of this, and the rules of organization and basically all the rules of interpretation, they're all here. And then the only thing I wanted to point out to, oops, if it would stop. Oops, okay, wait, stop. Is that here this is organized. I'm sorry, this is a little difficult now to do. But this is how it's organized. So here we have broken rice, but I could also take the grain rice. And if I look at tomatoes, you would see a change. I'm just trying to figure out where I can find, maybe if I can find the one with the tomatoes, I can find one. The point is, if you look at it like this will obviously be too much because you cannot look through the entire tariff like this. But to be organized and to understand how this works, here we go. You can you can look at the structure. If you wanted to understand actually how the tariff is set up, one thing is to go to the legislation like this, and then you see the little stars here. And these little stars, they indicate a new tariff, or a new code, or an updated code, or something changed. So if you have the luxury of time, you could spend a bit of time understanding this. It will give you a better understanding as to what the tariff changes are, as opposed to looking just at the Excel sheet. So if you are in a role where you need to explain something to someone, that might be a better way to do it, because it's just more understandable and logical. And I would do it like this. I take this as a concept. I say, okay, tomatoes and chilled and fresh, they're organized like this, and they have the star, so it's indicated in new. And then I send the spreadsheet that explains it, so people can associate it like this. So don't know if that's helpful, but that's anyway how I do it. Rightio, good. So this is what happens when you click, and then when you then dive a little deeper into these changes. I told you about the correlation table, that's fine. Just a very quick word on the UK. So the UK now also needs to, just 1 second. So just a word on the UK tariff. The UK also has a tariff. It's not obviously the EU tariff, and it also needs to be updated. Now the UK does it a little bit differently. The one thing to look out for is the reference document. So there's UK updated tariff reference document, and that means we have the online tariff sorted. And that will then give you the tariff schedule and various other parts that you need to be aware in order to be able to apply the UK tariff. So don't do the mistake of copying what the EU has done for the UK. It needs its own tariff. And we can analyze this tariff together. I have a very quick look at the UK way of doing things. So if I did this right and I click here, then we can see that. The tariff is here. So you can see it. This is the UK version of the tariff. Has a lot of really good guides that I encourage you to have a look at. And yeah, this is how we start. And now the one thing that you need to know is that we have here a tariff stop notice. And this tariff stop notice is where you can get your final update. So if I look at the one that applies here, then you will see here the latest changes. Okay, so you'll see here the MFN rates and the likes of it. So just hang on a second, because just a second, please. Okay, so this is how this works then. The update is here. So you can see here, there are very specific changes that are being made. And then also you will have update to suspension in this case. So if you are concerned by the UK, if you're importing into the UK, these are little things that you might need to know, because they change all the time, and you can see it doesn't have to always do with the tariff changes. But if you look further down the line here, you'll see there is and this is what they call the update to commodity code structure to maintain dynamic alignment with the EU. And then you can see that the following codes have been created as of 1st of January, and that should align with what the EU has saying. So the UK is opting to have a dynamic alignment. That's what we call it. So you can see it's a little bit different. And then you could also go into the Northern Irish tariff if you wanted to see how that then looks, and how it is the same with the EU. I wanted to finish this section because I've been talking quite a long time now already, just to give you a bit of a flavor as to what are the kind of things that we see every year. So as you know, I monitor legislation every day. Me and my colleagues, we go above and beyond to create every week a product that you can be proud of. A product that tells you everything that changed in EU and UK customs every week. One document is all you need. All you do is you take the customs watch, you take 15 minutes, and you are up to date. It's basically this thing, what we're doing right now, just on paper. Okay? You can read it on the train, wherever. So what we look at particular is what are the classifications decisions coming from the EU. Okay? And here's just one of the examples that we saw. And that's where we create the decision library, because this we put into our decision tree library. And if you are ever importing as something under 392026, you would see this and you'd know, okay, This is how they think. This is how the EU classifies things, and that can help you with your classification. So here's an example of classification of pipette tips. And whenever there's a decision, the cases are interesting because they're always difficult. Okay, they're not easy to understand. So here we have a implementing regulation 2024-3020 of 29th of November 2024. That's how it comes out. And it talks about 3926/1997. Now, the easy answer is I'm not going to bother about that because it's not my area. I'm not importing anything under 3926. I won't read it. I think you should, because as a classifier, you are interested in understanding how something is classified and not just what it is, the logic behind it. If you get into the idea of how to correctly classify, then when you get to classify, it will be correct or more correct. So getting into the argument and understanding why something is so helpful. I'm a certified classifier, so that means I have been vetted to make sure that I know how to classify. So this is part of how I do this. So here we have pipette tips. You can read it yourself, what these are. Here's a picture of what they are. And there's always a question of what they are. Okay, so now there is some argument says this is it, and the other argument says, well, it could also be this. So what is it? Okay, so, and now here it's interesting because the classification decision makers, so the EU 27 classification experts, they have said that these pipette tips are classified based on their material rather than as machinery parts. Okay, so you could see them as machinery parts or as material, and then they tell you what the general rules are that have been applied, and they tell you what the wordings of the CN code is. So the messages you've got to look at, you know, is it function or is it material? So that's the big question. Also, which rules of the general rules will I apply? Yes, and if I apply General Rule 1, well, I would need to find that wording in the headings. Okay, so they say you can find it here, and they would classify it as article as plastic. So materials more important than machine parts. They are therefore not dosing systems. So they could be part of mechanical and electronical functionality. Okay, so they are not dosing systems. They are plastic. That's a big difference. Dosing systems have a different commodity code, and dosing systems also have a different duty rate. So we need to have clarity of whether they're plastic or whether they're dosing systems. And this, in order to decide this, they called on the European Court of Justice in this case. So it's having a look at material versus function. It's having a look at the wordings. It's having a look at any potential judgment cases to get to the classification. It is not sufficient to say, I look at this and I say, this is part of a dosing system. This is part of 8479. No. You need to go further. Another very interesting case, and that's the last one, and then I will stop, is classification ruling electric mobility scooters, vehicle, or carriage for disabled persons. And here we actually have a court case. So we will also include that in the Customs Watch, of course. And we actually did, and we gave a big explanation in our update as to why this is interesting. You might not be in the business of this, but still, it's something so cool, because the question that we need to ask, what is this product? Is this a carriage for disabled persons? Is it a motor vehicle? Or what? Or is it a disabled person assistance tool? Where do you put it? 8713, carriage for disabled person, motor cars and other motor vehicles principally designed for the transport of persons. Is that it? So, when it comes to disabled persons. So there you can read, it is the Salvo 4800, a four-wheeled mobility device, and they have classified it as 871390 as a carriage for a disabled person, which is exempt from duties. However, Czech Customs classified it under 870310 and 18 as a vehicle similar to golf carts, which has 10% duty. So big deal. And now the difference is subtle, because if you look at the last example, we had completely different codes. We had different headings. One was 84 and 3926, and that this one we are within the same heading. Well, not quite heading, but chapter at least. So 8713, is it a carriage for disabled person? This one looks like it. Or is it similar to a golf cart? Now we look at the vehicle's features, such as maximum speed, whether it has adaptive controls for disabled users, whether it fits the criteria of 8317, despite the CN regular. What do the CN explanatory notes say? What are the related EU regulations for such vehicles, and so on. And this has then gone all the way up to the European Court of Justice. Continues on, and it was written that it is a golf cart. Da da da. So now you need to know that the law, as decided by the Court of Justice, has decided that this is a golf cart. If you look at it, this could be easily written by me, or by a disabled person, or by anybody, by you, probably. So this is not a specific cart for disabled users. Therefore, classification is 8713. And what's really interesting in this example, in my opinion, is you can talk a lot about around this. Okay, you can talk all of the arguments that I've just made. The one thing I'll say, it'll come back to one simple question. All of this will come back to one simple question. Argue with me. The question you need to answer with every classification is objectively, what is it? The word objectively is important, because if you are in the disability space and you work there, of course your mind will think this is disability scooter. But step back, ask someone else not in this space, like a customs official, and they'll say objectively this can be used by anyone. There's no reason why this should be just for disabled people. It is thinking like that that can practically help you with the classification. I've already told you this, and maybe you've seen this before. I've taken it from one of my webinars, the free webinars I've done. So if you've seen this before, great. The one thing I'll recommend for you is the strategy throughout 2025 to stay on top of the tariff changes. It has actually all of these layers, okay? And the first thing you need to obviously nail down is to think about your knowledge of classification. But then there's more, the exercise to do. So you need to look at the minutes of classification committees. We cover that in the Customs Watch. Why? Because this is where they will discuss what decisions are coming up. So by reading the classification committee minutes, which we include in the Customs Watch, you'll be able to know, in 2 weeks I'm expecting this, or in 1 month I'm expecting this. There are also explanatory notes. You need to know about those because they give you just that, explanatory notes, and they need to be consulted. BTI, ATR, cross-US, cross-rulings are very important as well. In order to understand if you're on the right track, you can always verify what other customs officials have to classify. Lots to talk about BTI, ATRs, no time for this right now, but very important part. Classification decisions, I already gave you 2 examples. You need to know when they're published, and you need to read them and understand the logic. And every time, it's like a little mini course of classification every time you read that. So I think it's important. Classification judgments, as I've just shown you, this is the case, really interesting. And of course, a little side of that is actually duty opportunities. I haven't talked about this much, but every year also there are duty suspensions. The UK does it again differently, has a different schedule, but the EU does it for the 1st of January and then the 1st of July. And the autonomous suspended duties, so the ones that go from 13% to 0 or 5% to 0 or whatever, they go down they are updated. And that's a real big opportunity, because if you are in the duty suspension system, if you are caught by this, or if you are fortunate enough to be mentioned in these regulations, then your duty rate will have just dropped to probably 0. So combining all of this together is a good strategy for tariffs, I should think. And that is where we are going to leave it for the session on tariffs. I hope this was useful. Big whistle-stop tour of all the changes, but this is the methodology that I use in order to prepare my clients and my companies that I support for the tariff changes. Let me know what you think, and if you have any comments, just get in touch, write them down in the comments down below, and I'll catch you at the next video. Thank you.